afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being so patient. As you can see, I'm double mic'd, so we are really prepared. I'm so thrilled to welcome you to this SAG Foundation conversation with Colin Farrell. Since bursting into the scene with his film Tigerland, he has been in demand from directors like Terrence Malick and Steven Spielberg, and more than held his own against great actors like Al Pacino, Tom Cruise, and Forest Whitaker in a very wide range of roles. He is doing some of the best work of an already very impressive career in Saving Mr. Banks, which I can't wait for all of you to see. Please welcome Colin Farrell.
Hello. Hello. This is great. Thank you. Oh, stop.
Actors.
Yes, actors. Surely you've got a little more left in your wrist. Come on. It's a very intimate setting.
We only have 2 hours, though.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on a great career, but particularly these last couple years and Saving Mr. Banks. I can't wait for everyone to see it. But I actually want to go back and start at the beginning. You were born and raised in Dublin?
1976, May 31st. Yeah, in Dublin. Yeah, I didn't leave to. I lived there until I was. When I was 17, I lived in Australia for a year, but I didn't come over to the States until I was 21 or 22.
And when did you first become interested in acting?
I always loved film. I didn't grow up in a very cultured environment. In my house, there was no. If I was to cast my mind into the head of an Irish Americans, I would cast my vision back across the Atlantic and think that a person who grew up and was reared in Ireland probably was reared around some form of folk storytelling, Irish mythology, limericks being sang. None of it. None of it. We really, there was no, it wasn't, my father was an athlete, was a professional footballer, soccer player. And so that was really the only particular kind of structure I remember in my relationship between he and I, and my parents came from working class stock, which doesn't, of course, exclude them from having an interest in the arts, but for whatever reason, there was no songs, there was no stories, there was no trips to the theatre. The cinema was once in every blue moon, but I kind of had a love for film from a very early age, and I just found it very affecting from a very early age, whether it was Billy Wilder stuff or more commercially minded contemporary film.
Who were some of, did you have heroes or certain people that you watched?
They were footballers. Honestly, like Maradona was, when I was 10 when Mexico 86, the World Cup in 1986 was on. And it wasn't until later, I think I remember, one of the first times I remember just being affected by the fluidity of a performance or the ease of a performance was Steve McQueen in The Cincinnati Kid. And I think I saw that when I was about 12. I was also affected by the ease and the fluidity of Marilyn Monroe at an early age, and I fell in love with her in short order as soon as I saw her in Some Like It Hot.
We actually have a question from the audience.
Yeah.
Prince Littlewolf?
Prince Littlewolf.
That's your real name?
Wow.
I'm sorry, I think we've gone through this before.
It's all downhill from here, isn't it? And then next is Paul.
Yeah, right. Poor
or
Paul.
Colin, no insult to Paul, or Colin. Hello, Prince Littlewolf.
I bring up this question because this is something I've read about. You and your brother took dancing lessons and auditioned for Boyzone? Is that true?
There must be a better question on there somewhere.
Well, yeah, there is.
I did. No, absolutely. I did. I was a chancer. I would have done not anything for money, but I didn't finish. I didn't get my high school degree. I didn't finish formal education. Certainly, college was never on the cards. The only thing I ever thought I may like to investigate with regards to a third level education was journalism. So that's a long way of saying yes, I did dance classes. My brother was befriended a person named Jane Shorthall who was a dancer on the scene in Dublin and taught all sorts of contemporary dance, and he did classes with her, and me being 16 and looking up to my brother, I went along to the classes and had a field day, and it was the same kind of group of people that led him to a friendship with a woman called Jill Doyle, who was an actress in Dublin, and they now have the National Performing Arts School in Dublin together. They're business partners, my brother and Jill Doyle. But so the dancing was kind of a stepping stone into doing my first acting workshop when I was about 17, which was in the same old decrepit and wonderfully character-filled building in Dublin that's no longer there.
And I've read about this on Wikipedia, but I never trust anything I read online. Did you audition for Boyzone?
Good to hear.
This was like a boy band?
Oh yeah, I did audition for Boyzone. Yeah, absolutely. I was dancing on a dance floor, as one tends to, in a nightclub in Dublin. I think I was 16 or 17, and fueled by various things, including good music, and a T-shirt that was way too tight. And Louis Walsh, the manager of Boyzone, the boy band. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Boyzone, but very successful Irish boy band, commercial music. And Louis Walsh came up, shaking your head in disgust. The exit's that way. Oh, Belfast. Louis Walsh came up and he said, "I'm going to put this band together. They're going to be huge. You want to be in?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever, man." And I went along the next day. They had an open audition. He said, "Come along and just sing, because we're going to have some press there to do some photographs, but you're in the band. I want you in." And I said, "Well, I can't really sing." And he goes, "Well, it doesn't really matter." And I went, "Okay, cool." And I sang "Careless Whisper." That's a hard song, man. That's a hard song. There's some range. That George Michael's got some range. And he's a good singer too. And
You beat me to it.
Anyway, I sang "Careless Whisper" twice, and I think they made me sing it a second time because they couldn't believe how tone deaf I was the first time. And that was it. That was an ambition that I didn't actually have was shot down before I could cultivate it around the world of contemporary produced music.
So your guaranteed spot in the band disappeared?
Disappeared swiftly, yeah, in quick haste.
In fairness to Prince, I feel I should complete the question, which was, have you ever been asked to do a musical, or would you do something like Les Mis?
Would I? Yeah. I had a really cool meeting with Tom Hooper, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was thinking of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Toby Hooper. Yeah. Very different. One has an Oscar.
Yeah. Tom, I had a really cool meeting. I'd do anything. I mean, anything that spoke to me, and that's really what it comes down to. People said, "Would you do a romantic comedy, or would you do a genre film that was a horror, or would you really?" There's no line in the sand that dictates what is excluded as far as genre or sensibility of story. Or I would love to. I don't think anyone would have me, and I think I'd have to send out letters of apology. But do you know what I'd love? Do you know what I love still to this day is Jesus Christ Superstar. Really? I love that musical.
It's a great
I
one.
do. I love it. I think it's genius. I love the riffs in it, and I love. It's kind of the story of Christ and the disciples and Judas Iscariot. It's kind of a cool story. It's kind of really. It's a great story. It's been done so many times, but Norman Jewison, of course, did it and did it so well. And I'm sure plenty of people hate it, but yeah, I would.
Did you meet with Tom Hooper about Les Mis?
I sat with him. We talked about it. Yeah, for about 2 hours. We had a really cool chat. Sometimes you meet a director and you meet for a project that they might not necessarily be into you for the project, and you might even not have read the project, but you just, as an actor, you use it as an opportunity just to meet somebody whose work you appreciate. And so I didn't come away from the meeting going, "What did he say?" Or is there any? Or is there was, the only part that I was too young for anyway. But I got such a wonderful cast. But it was really lovely to meet him. We had a really good chat about, because he seemed to be going into a world that he knew very little about. Of course, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of film and how to tell a story using that medium. But the world of the musical and the world of audio recordings even, and how to, he was just formulating the idea of capturing everything live and raw. It was really cool.
Can you say, was it for the role of Javert?
No, it wasn't even for a specific one. It was either one of the two boys was, an agent that was going with. I was saying to my agent, "I'm too young for both of them. They shouldn't." It was like, Hugh Jackman. Duh. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
please,
but Russell Crowe, not duh.
Well,
so
moving on to the next question.
I said it, you didn't, so it's okay.
I just smirked knowingly.
Well, look at what you avoided. Think of it that way.
Boyzone. Yeah. Back to Boyzone. Back to Boyzone.
Now, you attended the Gaiety School of Acting?
Yeah.
Is that correct? How did you get involved there?
It's a 2-year full-time course. I auditioned for it. I'd come back from living in Australia for a year, and I had, for the first time in my life, at 18, I had found myself working with an eclectic bunch of actors, singers, performers, clowns. This really bohemian bunch of folks that were from various parts of Australia, but a lot of them were Australian, Russian, first generation, and they were just a real cool bunch of cats. And it was the first time I'd ever been introduced to, you know, films of Tarkovsky and really thick black coffee and vodka shots at 12 in the afternoon, because despite what you think about the Irish, we're not that big into shots, really. It's more of an American concept, I found out when I came here and heard the likes of Irish car bombs. And I was like, really? Really? Wow. Way to trivialize terroristic violence, but however.
I'll have 3.
So when I was in Australia, I came back from Australia and I had the idea of maybe doing something of acting, and I had done a workshop in Dublin before I went to Australia, but the workshop was all kind of individual performance-based stuff, and it was more monologue-based, and then getting the opportunity to work with a bunch of actors on a text in Australia. We did this play called Kelly's Reign, which was about the Bush Rangers, Ned Kelly and his crew, and I literally got the part because the actor who was playing Stevie Hart had got a Pepsi commercial.
Nice.
That was going national in Australia, so he was like, "See if I can."
And where is he now?
Being ever I don't know, I hope he's happy wherever he is, but being ever the capitalist, I jumped in and was extremely uncomfortable because, again, I was still, you know, I was like a bad leftover from the club days back in Dublin, and there was all these dudes and dudettes wearing hemp and long hair and stuff and beards, and but it was an amazing education. It was an amazing education hanging out with them for 6 or 7 or 8 months, and they were nothing if not purely creatively minded, and everything was kind of revolved around story, music, character, observation, and so when I got back to Dublin, I auditioned for the Gaiety School of Acting and got accepted, and that was that.
And what sort of training, or did they teach a particular method? Or
No, they don't. They don't refer to any method. They don't refer to a Stanislavski or a Meisner or a method as such. They just pay due attention to character and background, and it's very theatrical based. I mean, it's opened up now so that I think they have a film course, which I think is just basically bringing the same teachings that they pass on, but kind of bringing it in a little bit and just making the performance smaller. I hate to simplify, but in many ways, that is the kind of physical resultant thing. So it was just, we did everything from fencing to mime to dance to, and I had a really hard time with the acting class. It was the only class that I struggled in. Yeah. It really was. It was I was great at mime. Pull a rope, and you'd pretty much think there was a rope there, and if you were mad. And dancing I did all right in because I had a bit of backstory with that, and then the acting class I had trouble with, and I had a teacher that I think thought that it probably didn't help me out that I may have worn a pair of leather pants into one of the into the audition as well, and it would have been far a bit smarter of me to wear hemp. I realised, hindsight being 2020, but I think the teacher thought that I was great and I didn't need anything, and I think she thought that I was dreaming of the things that have since happened to me, which I actually wasn't at the time, because I don't think for me, the idea of going to drama school and going to theatre school and committing what I thought would be 2 years of my life full time at the age of 19 wasn't about stretch limousines and red carpets. It wasn't. If that's what it was purely about, I would have straight away got on a plane and just come over here and waited tables. And I mean, like many others, I think that's what I would have done. And I'm impulsive enough to have followed in that way. But it was about trying to learn some sense of craft and trying to be as well equipped as I could to have an understanding of what it could be to be an actor from the inside out. I knew that conceptually I could understand it from the outside in, just as a young guy, but to really get inside it. So it was an interesting time. It was a great time when I think back at the Gaiety. I had a really cool year, and I learned, I don't know what, but I learned plenty, but I never know. But I've never been able to say what I've learned from working with any actors or directors. What did you learn? It's kind of like, you end up making stuff up. It's like going to the confessional, You sin, you lie, and then they give you, and then you go back and you say, I just lied, and then they give you more, and it's just this...
Vicious cycle.
Indeed.
So is it true you booked your first professional job when you were still at school?
Yeah, I did this Irish film called Drinking Crude that was shot for a dime, and I had a little part in that, and as a result of that getting one screening, I think in the Dublin Film Festival years ago, maybe 16 years ago, I got an Irish agent whose name is Lisa Cook, and she runs the Lisa Richards Agency, and it's one of the most exclusive agencies in Dublin, and of the three, and And she said, do you want to audition for stuff for your during your summer holiday? And I said, sure. I said, just even for practice. And I auditioned for Falling for a Dancer. It was a 4-part miniseries shot for the BBC, and I auditioned for that, and I got it, and I had a real, wow, what to do, to stay in and do the second year, or to go out and just try and learn on the job, and I chose the latter.
Any regrets about not finishing school?
Oh yeah, but every day. No, not really, not really. And listen, I had. It's funny because I had a young man come to me in Dublin who's a son of a friend of mine, and he said, I'm thinking of going to the Gaiety, and I asked other people, and they said, no, I've also got this job offer. And I directed him towards going to the Gaiety, because the one thing I did know is that he's 20. I said, you've got loads of time, you really have. And it's a really cool time to work with fellow students and have kind of a common goal and disparate opinions and approaches, but some kind of central structure to keep it all together. So I thought drama school was a really cool year. I loved it.
So you said, don't do what I did.
I said, don't do what I did, yes, yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And then I believe your first film was The War Zone?
Yeah.
Directed by Tim
Tim
Roth,
Roth,
also
yeah.
an actor. How did that role come about, and what was it like, being thrust into a film with Tilda Swinton and Ray Winstone?
I didn't have much to do with them. I mean, I was incredibly intimidated, I remember, by the whole experience. I really was intimidated, because I actually didn't have that much of a foundation. I felt I came into it late, and I did have a tricky year the first year in drama school, so a lot of stuff was beginning to happen. I was getting work, and yet I didn't feel like I had earned it, or I didn't feel prepared for it, or I had no kind of, felt like I had no internal structure. I wasn't really clear enough as to why I was doing it. It had started as a curiosity, and before that curiosity got to grow or branch into something that I could discern, I was working. And I found difficulty in discerning what that curiosity could be in work, because I just felt the pressure of opportunity. And I was aware of how fortunate I was, but I just, which is not my long-winded way of saying that job was a nightmare at all, but I had very little to do in it, and I remember Tilda and Ray I had a great time with Lara Belmont and I think it was Freddie Cunliffe, the Prater brother, was it? But Ray and Tilda are incredibly strong characters and wonderful actors, and I had known a little bit of Ray's work because I had seen, was it Scum? What was the film he did when he was in a Borstal? I can't remember. It was a film that was done maybe in the late 70s or early 80s, and he's brutal in it.
I don't even know what a Borstal is.
A Borstal is kind of like a halfway house for boys who are juvenile criminals, and he was put into it in the film, and then he became, one of his lines is, I'm the fucking daddy, I'm your fucking daddy, who's your daddy? And he kind of rose up through the ranks within the system in the Borstal, and he's ferocious in it and terrifying. So that was the really sweet reference point I had for meeting him, which is, sometimes it's terrifying meeting people whose work you really respect. Not terrifying is a strong word, but I remember working with Peter Mullen, and I had just seen My Name is Joe, which kind of, did a number on me and continues to if it's ever on or I see it again. But it was wonderful to be around a film set and to, and it was a very intimate film set, and I remember Tim had created an environment that was very much a family environment, which I think you can do regardless of how big or how small a production is. I think it's possible. I don't think just because something has a $150 million budget that the experience has to be impersonal. Nor do I say you have to go around high-fiving everyone every morning, but I think, as much as you can have a sense that it is a collective experience and that film, yes, it's a director's medium, but as much as each person on it, down to the, everyone involved can have the feeling that they have some kind of emotional stock in it or some interest in it, or that their opinions are valued. I think it's a good thing.
And then I know you were cast in Ordinary Decent Criminal, and that came about from Kevin Spacey.
I was doing a play in London, I was doing a play in London. Spacey was doing The Iceman Cometh at the Almeida, and I was doing a thing called In a Little World of Our Own by Gary Mitchell, a Northern Irish playwright. Do you know him? Gary Mitchell. Good, really wonderful playwright, and so we did that in the Don Mar, and Spacey came along and saw that, and then we all went out for drinks. There was a cast of 5 of us and him and a couple of his friends. We all went out for drinks later, and he said that he was doing a film in Dublin, and if he wanted, he put in a word with the director, and I said happy days, and I met Thaddeus O'Sullivan with the Hubbards, who were casting directors of the film, and got to work on that, and that's when I worked with Peter Mullen as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a blast. That was cool.
Was that the
fun.
last time that you were on stage?
That was
In a
last
play?
time. Well, yeah, absolutely. Other than struggling to be myself on things like this, yeah, that was the last time. It was an amazing experience. I
you
loved it.
Want to
Do
get
I,
back?
I think so. I think at some stage, I'm still not happy with film though and how it's all gone. It's an itch still that I don't know if it'll ever feel duly scratched, but I'm early enough in the scratching process to go. I'm not ready to even walk away to the land of the fourth wall just yet. But I think at some stage I'd love to. It was an amazing experience I had with a really good bunch of actors, and the whole rehearsal process and how detailed it was and how intense it was, and just the idea of going on a complete journey, whatever the character's arc is, if there is an arc, or even just if it's a linear journey, being able to experience the three acts, the beginning, the middle, and the finish, in totality. Because I just did this thing, Miss Julie, and I shot with. Sorry to jump forward.
No,
Is that
it's
cool?
fine. We don't have to be linear here.
Cool, nice. Curve coming up.
We can do flashbacks.
So-
You're good at flashbacks.
yeah. Where's the blood in the bed and the spritz me? We did. Liv Ullman adapted the Strindberg play Miss Julie, and myself and Jessica Chastain and Samantha Morton just shot it in Northern Ireland recently, and it was so tough. I mean, the material is so bleak and so demanding, and I remember thinking, how in God's name does anyone do this on stage? And
true.
how is it not about self-flagellation? I mean, really, it's a dangerous line between, sharing part of your own history or the history of others by what's presented to you in writing form, or stories that you may hear, and adapting them as your own, whatever. But it's a difference between that and wanting to reach out and connect, and just, it's a dark, dark world. And I was thinking, God, at least I don't have to do it on stage. And then I thought, well, maybe it'd be easier on stage, because maybe you get to flush the whole experience out every night. And you get to walk away from it, knowing that the lines are in there, knowing that the journey is already in there, that it's just going to come out in a different manifestation or interpretation the next night. Whereas there was a pregnancy to doing it on film, where every night there was something unexperienced that you were walking into the next day that you knew was going to be brutal. And I was like, I think that's it. Yeah, I think no, better to do it on stage. Not that I'm going to be, auditioning for it anytime in the near future, but I would love to. There's something about, as I said, the totality of the experience. I'm really getting to. I think theatre is more of an actor's medium. The actor is up to the point, is in control, and they get to have a fluidity of experience that you don't get to have on film.
Just out of curiosity, I know Jessica had just finished doing The Heiress on Broadway. When you
Right.
guys shot Miss Julie, did you ever
Yeah.
ask her which
I
was
like,
harder?
if anyone needs to do a comedy, it's you, young lady. Did I ask her about the heiress?
Yeah, did you ask her if it was more difficult to do a play every night, or to play this character in Miss Julie?
I didn't. I think I have the answer to that one without asking her.
Really?
I think, but I would never speak for her. But I think, yeah, Miss Julie was what a character. I mean, she and the work that she did in it was extraordinary and incredibly painful to observe. And because we all get it, it's fiction at the end of the day. But if somebody gets in your face and screams at you, or if you scream at somebody for 30 seconds, unless you're a well-trained drill sergeant, it's going to bring up emotions in you. So to sustain that over a 14-hour day shooting, and to do it in the conditions that we did it in, the emotional and psychological conditions of the back and forth, and the mutual desire to abuse and exchange of power, yeah, it was tough, but I'm glad I did it.
Well, what would you say has been your most difficult role today?
Miss Julie.
It is Miss
Yeah,
Julie.
yeah, really.
Wow.
That 5 weeks was trickier than. Next to that, I'd say Alexander.
Really?
Yeah, that was intense. That was intense. It was so intense for so many reasons.
Well, I want to go back to your big breakthrough film role, which was 2000's Tigerland.
Yeah.
Such an amazing performance. You won
you.
the Boston Film Critics Society Best Actor Award. Really, put you on the scene. And this was Joel Schumacher's return to indie films after the Batman and Robin movies. How did you even become aware of the script and in the running for the role?
So I had Lisa Cook, who was representing me in Ireland, and then she had a relationship formed with various agencies in Los Angeles, and there was an agent from CAA who was coming to Europe, and he was given carte blanche by CAA to sign a young actor, and I think he saw 2 actors in London and maybe 2 actors in Dublin. And we went out one night and had a good night and showed him the town, and he said, do you want to, myself and my friend Rue dropped him back to his hotel at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he said, do you want to do this? And I said, do what? And he said, do it. No, yeah, sure, okay, whatever it is, I'll give anything a go. And he said, I'll organise some meetings and maybe we'll get you over to Los Angeles in a month or two. And I said, okay. And I came over and I did 3 weeks of general meetings. And fairly high-end meetings and studios and all that kind of stuff. And I found, again, I knew how lucky I was, but I found it quite deflating, and I just didn't. It was a lot of energy, and it was bigger than me. And I kind of came home, going, ugh, I feel a bit dirty. And then I got a call from Josh saying, Joel Schumacher, do you know him? I said, yeah, it was Lost Boys and Sam was Fire. And he said, yeah. He said he's directing a film. I'm going to send it to you and maybe put yourself on tape. So I did that. He sent me Tigerland. And I knew it. When I read the script, I knew it. I kind of felt sometimes you're inside something, and as soon as you read it, and that makes you want to be in that world because you feel like you have some inherent understanding, and yet understanding never exists in completion. There's always some crack that needs to be filled, or some ray of light that can be surprisingly blinding and can locate your unknowing of something that you thought you completely understood. But this was that thing. I knew it. I felt inside of it. Other things, you read them and you don't know it, but it piques your curiosity for not knowing, and that's what makes you go towards it. But Tigerland, I felt a bit of an affinity with the Boz character. Maybe I was having delusions of grandeur, but I always felt like it was a bit, go against the grain, and I just, wasn't really one that easily immersed himself in systems that were prepared and presented to me. I had an amazing time doing that film with an amazing bunch of young actors. I mean, it really was. It was so kind of raw and all handheld stuff, and we lived in boot camp for 2 weeks together before we started shooting, so it was a glorious time.
Was there a certain amount of pressure, though? I mean, this is your first lead role. You're kind of carrying the movie.
Oh, it's weird. Did I feel it? I mean, there's no doubt it was there. I don't know. I think the pressure was kind of diluted by all of us. I knew that Boz and Paxton, myself and Matt Davis were kind of the lead roles, and then Shay, who's my friend still, who played Wilson, but there was so many of us around. I really got lost in the kind of collective experience of just being a grunt, of being one of the guys. I could have made it a lot harder for myself. I remember when we started boot camp, and the Mike Stokey, who was in charge of the boot camp, and the other Marines and soldiers who were in control of us. There was about 20 of us lads, and I remember the first day, Stogie came out and he was like, so who, because we were all calling each other character names for the 2 weeks of boot camp, and we were all addressed in character names. It was very intense, really. I was like, geez, these two fellas take it serious. But Stogie came out and he was like, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name? And who are you? I said, Private Boz. And he was like, oh, so you're Boz. And I knew, I was like, oh, okay, earmarked already. I knew, and in my head I'd gone, okay, so am I going to be in character for this? And am I going to mess with, try and do that thing? And I thought, no, the greatest thing about Boz is that he can soldier better than most guys, and he does have an understanding of all the rules. And so I thought that I'd just be a good student and learn for the 2 weeks so that I could have a knowledge of what I decided not to carry through or follow through on during the film. But
we actually have an audience question from Rebecca Brooks about
anyone still
Tigerland.
awake?
It says, when you auditioned for Tigerland, did you have to audition in a hotel in London?
I auditioned in a hotel in New York. Was it the Mark Hotel, the Regent? Yeah, myself and Shay Wiggum got in an awful fight.
What, really?
Yeah. I mean, it was short-lived, but it was fairly aggressive. Yeah.
In the hotel?
In the hotel, there's food everywhere. There's plates.
You had a food fight?
No, yeah, spaghetti bolognese, pie. No, I had been offered the role based on, I had auditioned, put myself on tape in Dublin and sent it over. And Joe Schumacher called me and he said, listen, if you're in Los Angeles, I liked your tape. If you're in LA, I'd love you to read in person again with some other actors that I'm thinking of for Paxton. But if you're not planning on coming, we're not going to fly you out. We're not going to say, obviously, really wanted me. And I somehow found myself in Los Angeles and went along, and they were reading 3 or 4 actors for Paxton, and we did that, and then I got offered the part. And then Arnon Milchan, actually, who was the head, I don't know if he still is, of New Regency. Arnon wanted to meet me before he signed off on it and said to Joel that he could have the cast he wanted. So I met Arnon, and he said, he said, just have to ask you, he said, this is just an answer to your last one, he said, this is a really big responsibility to carry this film. And he said, you're an Irish kid. He said, we'll work, this has been a really good experience, we'll work together again. But just make sure, do you think you can do this part? I remember going, yeah, of course I can. I remember thinking, wow, I had a lot of respect for him for putting it to me like that, as honestly as that. I just made sure I got into the business of trying to find a dialect coach after that.
That was actually
but
my
New
next question.
York, yeah, myself and Shea Wiggum. So I had the part, even though you're still never comfortable. You can be, people have shot movies, and halfway through the movies, actors have been asked to leave and been replaced. So you're never fully comfortable in your own arrival. But Shea Wiggum was auditioning for the part of Wilson, and I arrived in the bar, and I knew something was up because I arrived in the bar and I was told, that's the guy you're reading with today. And I said, how's it going, man? He was like, yeah. I was like, here goes this character thing again. And I was like, wow, this is intense. So he said to me, I remember him going, Shea, he's quite kind of serious about it all. And he said, I'm going to come for you. I mean, it's going to, you know, I'm just going to just know that I'm going to be. And I said, cool. I said, I'll be there with you every step of the way, man. And he went, okay. So Arno Milchin is sitting on the floor, and Joel Schumacher's sitting over there, and there's someone else, another producer over there, and there is the table with those beautiful steel semi-spherical things to reveal the delicious food you've ordered. And there's about 4 of those, and Shea is lying on the floor, and it's the scene where he shoots me on the range, or he goes to shoot me on the range, and it gets to that point, and he pulls up the gun, and I, Wilson, and I go and smack this imaginary gun out of his hand, and the fucker launched at me. He launched at me. So I picked him up and he went over my shoulder and put him on the table, and food went everywhere. And then I put my knee on the back of his neck, and I continued the scene and started shouting, get some help, Paxton, get some whatever. And everyone was shooting. Everyone. And then Joel said, cut, and they were all like, wow, that was, I mean, it just wasn't expected. Yeah. It was a moment of pure aggression because, you know, aggression, particularly if you're, you know, a man, and if you're a man, you're at least got one toe of one foot still in the cave, so aggression is never really that hard to access. It's dark in there as well. Yeah, so that was the hotel room.
Wow.
Fiasco, yeah.
The other part of Rebecca's question, which you sort of addressed, was how did you prepare for the audition, and did you use a coach?
Did I use a coach? Not for the audition. I don't think so. Did I? Oh, maybe I did. Maybe I worked with Conal Carney. I had worked with an amazing acting coach, a really cool man by the name of Conal Carney. And Conal had been an actor in Dublin for years and had graced the stage of the Gate Theatre and the Abbey Theatre, our National Theatre, and he'd also worked with Marcel Marceau doing mime, and encyclopedic knowledge of film and television and theatre.
Did you show him your rope trick?
He taught me. Yeah. He taught me that. I'd be nothing. There'd be no rope there if it wasn't for Conal. What do you mean there's no rope there? And I think he worked with me on it. He worked with me on my audition for the Gaiety School of Acting, the Last Menagerie. I did Tom's final monologue, and he worked with me on that. And yeah, that's the play I'd love to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that. Streetcar might be a bit too much pressure, but
well, maybe a little.
I'd love to.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Actually, Oscar Zanetti has a question along those lines.
Okay,
you have a great talent for accents. Is it natural, and do you?
Oscar has? Are you talking to? Oh no!
I don't know.
It's like, Oscar, you have a great talent for accents.
Oscar.
Now let us hear one.
Come up here, Oscar. Wants to know if it's natural, or do you work with a dialect coach?
I think, and this is not agreeing with you, by the way, but thank you. But I'm handy enough at being at mimicking. I'm a little bit handy at that. I can usually meet someone and fairly quickly adapt some kind of proximity to certain characteristics or sounds, tones. But I've worked with great dialect coaches through the years. I've worked with from Catherine Charlton to Joan Washington and Judy Dickerson and Michael Buster are 4 really wonderful dialect coaches that I've worked with. And dialect, it's a funny one, you know. It's God, I do find it terribly boring at times. I mean, it's, you know, it just dips into the world of academia. And part of the whole reason of getting involved in acting for me was that it was another path away from such trifles as the life of the academic. And that, you know, I suppose dialect is about as empirical as acting can be. It's about the best opportunity you have to, in a very particular way, say if something is right or wrong. It's still all down to perception, of course, and there is no scientific certainty. But for me, it's quite simply, dialects are quite simply something that is another avenue into the character or something that is a wall between you and the character. It's one or the other. There's very little middle ground. But it really warrants and deserves as much attention as you can ever pay it. And then it can be fun as well. I mean, for me, the trickiest one to do is standard American because of the word standard, and you don't ever want to do anything that's standard. You want to, go above your own standards or other people's, and to just do something, because the more specific and the more geographically placed something can be, the greater idea you'll have of even socioeconomic foundation for such a thing. But yeah, dialects are interesting.
So you received amazing reviews for Tigerland, and it really seemed to launch your career in Hollywood. At least that was the perception. Did it change things, or were things already sort of in motion before that movie came out?
No, that was insane. That was insane. I had no idea. I'm only getting over it still. That was it. Really. I think this town. I think human beings operate from a place of fear a lot in our lives. I mean, I know I do, as a man, you either run towards it too hastily sometimes, or you try and ignore its existence, but I think fear is quite present in a lot of our lives, and this town particularly, because the consequences of missing an opportunity could be so great, or because the consequences of capitalizing on an opportunity that reaps rewards can be so great, there is a high fear factor involved in Hollywood. And I capitalized, I believe, on that. That wasn't what I was thinking at the time. I'm going to capitalize on the fear factor in Hollywood. But I think that a lot of people had heard a lot of stuff about Tigerland, and they were all kind of jostling to get me to sign on this or do that or do it. I mean, the opportunities that came my way were so kind of frustratingly beyond my comprehension and understanding, and it was amazing, but it was too much. But I'm here, so it wasn't, but it was. It really at the time. And I remember, I mean, the second film I did, which it's a close call, I think, between two, but I think it's the worst reviewed film I've done. And that was the second one, so it was a quick kick in the arse I got. Yeah.
Back to back.
And seriously, but I was advised not to do that film by various people at the time. And I remember I was offered $350,000 to do that film. And I was like, I can't say no to that. It's not like I didn't want anything. I didn't want a fast car. I didn't want a wardrobe. I didn't really care. I'm not. But I was like, I just can't. I didn't feel good enough about myself to say no to it. Yeah. Was the bottom line. I didn't feel confident enough in my own abilities to say that's amazing, and I'm in a very fortunate place, obviously, if I'm getting such an offer. But no, it doesn't feel right. It's taken me a long time to get to a place of something doesn't. I am not fully there either, because there are other responsibilities and fears again. Make hay while the sun shines. It's like, fuck, come on. What if the sun is always shining? It's just obscured by cloud cover from time to time, and so maybe not saying that I believe where I am now is going to continue forever, but I'm less concerned with the question even.
So how were you when you had all these scripts coming your way? How did you choose? Were you interested in story and director? Or?
I mean, I've worked with some really wonderful directors. I mean, I really have. And some of the films haven't been what the directors wished them to be, and some of the films haven't been what I've wished them to be. But I've had an amazing time working with directors, and directors are, believing it to be such a significantly director-driven medium. I think that's the most important factor. But again, if it's not on the if you hear the words, it's not on the page, be suspicious of those words. It's not on the page. If somebody like a Terry Malick says that, well then, okay, you can go with it.
Right.
Because it's in his head, or it's in his heart, or it's in every fibre of his being, but it's not on the page, or things that I'd heard through the years. And I was kind of like, it never actually got to be on the page. Never turned up. Wow. That page is just feeling so ignored right now.
So I believe you went straight from Tigerland to Heart's War with Bruce Willis and films like The Recruit with Al Pacino, and suddenly you're sharing top billing with these huge stars.
It was mad. Jenelle, it was mad. It really was. I mean, it was so mad, and it was. I had no. I mean, it's just a lot. I look at kids now who are experiencing great levels of fame. Who are experiencing great levels of fame, and I look at some of the ways they're acting out, and I'm going, part of me straight away goes, oh, what a pig, or what a dick, or what a... And part of me goes, wow, man, it's tricky. And it's tricky to say it's tricky because it's not... You're not starving, I'm not talking about people that are terminally ill. I understand that. I understand that I'm talking about a very particular, very fortunate bracket, but I'm also talking about the human heart, which doesn't exist within the language of, I'm not at the age of 20, wow, I'm not sick, and wow, I can put food on the table with my $20 million. It's all very overwhelming. There's a lot of energy around, and there's a lot of people that swarm around people that have the ability to create such wealth or whatever it may be. And it was tricky. I had a great time, and it was tricky.
Did you ever feel like you needed to prove yourself? Because you were very well known in the public eye, but you had these great performances in Tigerland, which was a very small film. Was it frustrating for you at all?
It's frustrating to work on films that don't work. It really is. I mean, that's the simplest way. It's really frustrating. Less frustrating than I would imagine how frustrated I'd be if I was in a coal mine for 50 cents an hour, like genuinely. But it's frustrating because it takes a lot of energy from a lot of people to make a film, whether it's a 5-week shoot or 3-month shoot or 5-month shoot. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of focus and a lot of care, both before and behind the camera. So when a film doesn't work out, I'm going to say it's destroying, but it's kind of like, and so it has affected me. Every time I've done a film that's been a disappointed, it has affected me. I didn't feel the pressure because of the Tigerland thing so much, because the response for that was so favourable, but just the pressure of, you get into why me and how, and I don't deserve and all that kind of stuff, and there's no deserving or not deserving. There's no, the person who's experiencing the equivalent misfortune as what you could term the good fortune I had, they don't deserve that. I didn't deserve what's happened to me. I didn't not deserve it, but I didn't deserve it. Just for whatever reason, it's been presented, and it's taken me a long time to just be okay with that and to understand that you just do within that. You follow your heart and you design whatever your own measure of integrity is, and you work within that. But so that was the pressure. The pressure was all this stuff happening to a kid from Dublin, 22 years of age, coming over to America and being given the keys to Hollywood, literally. And I was like, wow. And then a part of me was like, oh, I don't deserve this. And then a part of me was like, oh, I'll just put another one out. And then a part of me, Steve Martin introduced me introducing U2, I think, at the Oscars, maybe 12 years ago. And whatever the introduction was, I remember one thing he said, and it was, next step, rehab. Yeah, I know.
Have you ever said anything to him about that?
No. I can't really give out to him, can I? He was kind of, the prescience was there. But it was probably a pretty obvious, end to a particular chapter. So it was very overwhelming, and I can't say I enjoyed the work as much as I have, is the point. I can't say I enjoyed I think I lost sight of, I think the tumult that surrounded the American part of my career, which came very early in my career, was so loud that it blocked out the initial purity of curiosity that I had as a kid in Dublin when I was 16 and walking into a workshop. And I was really piqued, and I was really inspired to try and figure out something about the human condition and about the things that make us all different and the things that make us all the same, and etc. And I had lost sight of that. It was drowned in this kind of cacophony of activity and success and noise and money and fame and wealth, and all the time trying to pretend I didn't care about any of it. But not caring aggressively is obviously caring. Just not knowing how to do it in a healthy way,
Well, one movie you made very early on that worked in every way is Minority Report.
Yeah,
Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have a lot of questions about that. But,
yeah, sure.
Just kind of curious from the beginning. I mean, when you get the call, I'm assuming it's a call that Steven Spielberg wants to meet you.
That's a huge one. I mean, that's no matter how foggy I was or confused that was a very clear wow. I mean, the first experience I had as a cinemagoer was E.T. And the first time I can remember crying while watching a film, or being really emotionally moved watching it, and I still can't see that flower wither. No, but
that was good miming.
So meeting and seeing all his work subsequent to that as well, I just, yeah, that was a huge one. I was a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of his. And sitting with him, he was shooting AI, I think, and I went out to the set and was put into this trailer and told they're breaking for lunch in 10 minutes. He'll be in 10 minutes. I was like, phew. And in came Steven Spielberg with a sardine sandwich on a plate, and he started talking about omega-3 and stuff, and I hadn't had a sardine in years, and I used to love sardines, and so we shared a sardine sandwich, and that was it. And we spoke for half an hour, and then I heard that he had said, I think Matt Damon was initially doing it, and then I think something else came up for Matt, but I got offered the chance to do it, and it was a wonderful experience. I mean, he's so particular, Stephen, but at the same time, he really knows how to surround himself with an incredible array of artists as well.
Was that the film where you and Christopher Plummer became drinking buddies?
Christopher Plummer, was Chris in that? No, Christopher was in. That was Max von Sydow.
Max,
yeah. He's a big man, isn't he, Max? No, that was on New World. I think I met Christopher first.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, God, I love Christopher Plummer.
Question from Napoleon? Napoleon
Wow.
sitting next to Prince.
Must get tense over there. I imagine there's some mutual envy. You're wishing you had the throne, and you're wishing you had less responsibility and back into the pure days of princedom. Hello.
One of my favorite films is Minority Report. How was your experience working with the great minds of Steven Spielberg and Tom Cruise? And do you have a particularly fond memory from that film?
I was, no, I think it was kind of, I was going to say, it was smart casting to cast me. Just that. And then, next question. No, because I think, whatever about how I was in it, there was a lot of energy around. There was a lot of talking about me and all that kind of stuff, as tends to be in this town. And so I think the relationship between Anderson and Danny Whitwer, who I was playing, was kind of arch, and it was about competition, and it was about one person getting ready to usurp the other, and one person getting ready to push the other to the side and fill a void. And not that Tom is going anywhere in the future, and not that, but I was a young kid coming up, and so I think it was kind of smart cast. There was a little bit of, I wouldn't say there was a frizz on, but a little bit. I loved working with him. So professional, really cool, gracious to everyone on the set, but I think it was kind of smart, Stephen, in that way. And that's basically what my job in the film was, to nip at Tom's heels, and as Danny Whitwer. And as I said, Stephen just, had such control over the set, but not with an iron fist. Is so excitable about the work. Still feels very much like a fan of film, as opposed to just being, a directorial master. And incredibly efficient set, and limited rehearsal, but very particular blocking. And him and Janusz Kaminski work. They have a shorthand and work very closely together. But it was just, I don't know that I've worked on many films where the world was as beautiful and as complete in its creation, and the mood reflected that world as much as it did on Minority Report.
Is it strange to you how some of the technology in that actually kind of came to exist?
It's like so passé.
So
I know. Yeah,
weird.
yeah. It's like an
at
episode.
the time when you're doing
It's
the
like an episode of Star
thing.
Trek, circa 1960. It's so. I know. It really is.
Did you
bizarre.
think this was strange when you were like...
All that stuff? Yeah, it was
and then
bizarre.
the iPad comes out. And
Yeah,
you're like,
I know. Yeah, my son's doing it in the living room. Like, oh, he's seen my films. No, just playing Angry Birds, which he's never played. But thank you, it worked. The joke worked. Yeah.
You followed that with one of my favorite films of all time.
Angry Bird.
Yeah, Angry Birds, the movie. If we have a couple hours to discuss Phone Booth, your reunion with Joel Schumacher. My love for this movie is well documented.
That's so cool.
I'm assuming that this was an offer from Joel?
It was. There was a couple actors going to do it initially. I think Will Smith was talking about doing it with maybe Michael Bay, and I heard a story that in a script meeting Michael Bay had with everyone else, he said, "When can we get it out of the booth?" Which is kind of like, it's called Phone Booth. And he was wondering when they could take it out of the booth, which is his choice and his question. But then it came to Joel. I think Joel was going to do it with Jim Carrey.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I don't know why that didn't work. But Joel called me up and he said, "Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'd love to do it." And he said, "We're going to shoot it in 10 days. We're going to do this, that, and we rehearse for 3 weeks, block it all down, shoot it in 9 or 10 days." And I was like, "Wow, that sounds intense." And it really was. It was one of the most. See, that was a different hard for Miss Julie. It was really intense, but it was so thoroughly enjoyable. And it didn't go, and few things do go, and few writers were as kind of painfully insightful and documented with such great detail the psychological and emotional foibles of human beings the way Strindberg did. So Miss Julie really does exist on its own, but in a good way. Phone Booth was one of the most, if not the most intense experience I had, in a really good way. I mean, we did rehearse it for 2 or 3 weeks in a room, sitting around a table, asking questions about the script, breaking it down, putting it back together, and then, so we were in a room for 2 weeks, and then we took it out to a street with some makeshift phone booth in the corner, and we blocked down where the cars were coming in, because we knew there was only going to be 9 days. And it was a blast. And there was no time to really overthink anything, or, it was just, if a film's like a marathon, it was very much a sprint, and it was very intense, and there was an actor who, Kiefer voiced the shooter, but initially there was another actor who played the shooter, and he was in the building across the way from me. He had the comfort of a script in front of him, so I'd be stuttering through lines because we were doing 10 pages of dialogue a day, and it was all very kind of highly strung, and and he'd go, "What's up, Stu?" Fuck you and your script with your Post-its and your binoculars. And he had like a microphone, a pair of binoculars. He's like, "Oh, what's up, Stu? You forgot your lines?" I was like, "God damn." He really, and this actor's a fine actor anyway, and you've seen his work, and he was really cool in the way he bullied me for the week. I loved that film, and it's very seldom that you get. You don't really, as an actor in film, you don't get to have any kind of relationship as such with the audience. They come after the fact. As Brendan Gleeson said, the audience is kind of the last member of the cast to be filled in, and the film doesn't exist without them, but you don't have that instantaneous relationship that you do in theatre. And Phone Booth kind of defied that idea. It was as close to a theatrical piece as you could get, in that the people who were working as the crowd, the actors who were working as the crowd every day, were the same people that came along, and it was only 9 days, but they weren't told what happens next in the story. So they were watching it all unfold and listening to my proclamations in real time for them. And we didn't do many takes. We maybe Max did like 3 takes on things, and we just had to move on. And Maddie Libatique had 4 or 5 cameras going at all times. But so they were watching it unfold. So that scene where I did the confession, and then I come out of that played all the way through till I come out of the booth saying, "Take me," and I got shot with the pellet in the chest. Mm-hmm. So it played. They were pretty caught up in it. Yeah. They really were. It was amazing.
And it was shot linear?
Yeah, we shot it all. Yeah. We shot Times Square, I think, was the first day. All the stuff in New York, and then we shot start to finish. Yeah, it was cool.
I love that you literally could not do that movie today because phone booths don't exist.
Phone booths don't exist, absolutely. And you just have paparazzi in the back of the shop, but then they'd explain themselves, I suppose. Yeah.
It does feel like a play in some ways, in that it's
very much
one location.
Mm-hmm. You could do it. You could easily do that.
With all the movies that are being turned into shows.
Wait a sec.
Yeah, this is
Prince said the musical. You're saying
musical phone booth.
Does anyone here copyright fast before this goes out?
You previously mentioned Alexander as being a really tough shoot.
Yeah.
And I believe, was that the first time in a while you'd had to audition?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was fun, yeah. It was fun. Yeah, it was fun to go back into a classic piece of text and just figure my way around it. Did Mark Anthony and for it, and in a really bad wig, a wig that was really bad and yet was slightly better than my hair in the film.
I was going to say, I thought that was your hair.
Still, talk about it's a major keloid still. But yeah, I auditioned for that with Oliver. We spent a day in a warehouse, I don't know where, somewhere in Los Angeles, and worked on the scene and worked on some of the script, some of the stuff in the script, and then some of the stuff that I had learned previous. Yeah, the script was amazing. It was
Yeah.
155 pages of just gut-wrenching stuff, and it just didn't get realized. I mean, there's a 5th version on its way. Oliver's.
Really?
Oh man, I just.
He's still cutting it somewhere?
Yeah. Swear to God, man. There is, I believe, his 5th version, and just his passion and his dogma with regards to that subject matter is so impressive. So impressive. He's so fueled by the desire to understand and to share that understanding, or at least share the questions that plagued him since he was a 20-year-old. I mean, he wanted to. I don't know if he was a history minor major in college, but I know he was fascinated by that particular time in antiquity in Alexander, and it was a story he always wanted to make, and the fact that it didn't come off the way he had wished, and for all of us, and that it was treated the way it was for all of us was, yeah, it was tricky.
What was difficult about the shoot itself?
The shoot itself, just the scope of the, for me, the scope of the story and the scope of the character, and I mean, I found him to be, you know, some of his acts were, you know, some of his acts are questionable, of course, and some of his acts were heroic, no doubt, and but I didn't find him emotionally to be a very heroic character. I didn't find him intellectually to be a very heroic character. I found him to be a fractured kind of boy in many ways who had never, you know, had the certainty of either of his parents' love, and had been used as a pawn by both his parents to hurt the other. And that in its psychology 101 was how I felt he was encapsulated, and then out from there was other behaviours that was inspired by other relationships that came into his life, but they were all inspired initially by what he went through with his parents. So I just found him, emotionally I found it a really, and physically it was tough. You know, there was 3 or 4 months of prep, and we were in boot camp for a month in the Moroccan deserts and all that, and again we had an amazing bunch of lads. And it was really unfortunate the film didn't work out for them, because I got another chance, but some of them had booked their tickets to Hollywood, and it didn't work out. Like some really fine Irish actors. Now they're all great. I've seen some of them through the years, and they're all doing great. But they were, you know, it would have been nice if the film had been a better launch point for them into other stuff, or a greater variety or choice of work maybe.
Jared Leto did okay.
Jared's done great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Jared, Elliot Cowan I've seen Elliot Cowan. Anthony Hopkins isn't struggling too bad. You know.
We had a question from Damien Snow. It's like everyone has a cooler name than me. That's like a Bond villain. Damien Snow wants to know: can you describe working with Angelina Jolie on the film?
Yeah. It was a bit weird working with her playing my mother. Initially, I found that rather strange. I didn't know who that was a testament on. Probably her maturity as a person, but that kind of thing is possible only in an Oliver Stone film, you know. She was amazing. She's amazing. She's an extraordinary woman. I mean, first and foremost, I think that's something that's become all too plain to see through the years. Not that it's about any of us knowing that, but she's an extraordinary woman. She's an extraordinary engine. I don't know how she does the things she does, but a really, really spirited and wow, big, huge-hearted human being, incredibly bright. And working with her she was very intense. She's a pacer like me. She paces before scenes. We'd be literally doing figure eights around each other, looking at each other, going, "Oh, you too." And I loved working with her. As I said, you know, there was a very particular suspension of disbelief that had to take place for me to buy that I was her son, and it resulted also in one of my more unfortunate of my 3 or 4 hairdos in the film, my Doris Day number. But I loved working with Angelina. I think she's an extraordinary actress. Yeah, there are attributes she has as an actress that you can't learn. You know, there's something innate in her.
I love that at this time, Alexander was a big budget studio movie, but you were doing these great indie films like Intermission and A Home at the End of the World. Was that a conscious choice?
Yeah, no, I was I think I was trying to. I think those films, particularly Home at the End of the World, was the voice of the 16, 17-year-old in Dublin trying to find his way through with all these incredible offers of big budgeted films and big budgeted fees I was getting, and big name directors who I respected, by the way. I mean, you know, it's not like you're selling out to play Alexander in an Oliver Stone film, or, but I think that was the voice of curiosity that I talked about being the purest form of my creative voice, if I have one, was kind of coming through, particularly at Home at the End of the World, because I loved that script and I loved the book and I loved the hours as well, and to get the opportunity to do that was kind of special.
How did your agents feel at the time with you eschewing sort of these big offers to go off and do these small?
I think they were fine because they were kind of doing grand with what was coming in as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I think they were fine with it. A lot of it's hazy to me. It really is, man. It's strange. A lot of it is very. There's about 7 or 8 years there. I mean, I can't remember a frame of Miami Vice. I mean, I'm telling you, I saw that film. I was like, wow. Don't tell me what happens next. I was like, you know, I think about. But anyway, so I'm not quite. I genuinely am not quite sure what the. I'd be making it up, you know, which I'm cool with doing sometimes. But I'd be making it up if I knew what the dialogue was about, whether they wanted me to. But I think they were okay. I mean, they certainly understand, and Josh and Kelly at the time I was working with understood that, you know, eclecticism is not a bad thing with regards to a career, especially if you want to have some longevity.
I spoke to you around the time Alexander was coming out, and I remember you said at the time you had never really been happy with any of your performances. Yeah. Were you being serious, or do you still feel that way?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one to appraise oneself. I think that's possibly one of the great things about theatre, is that you don't have that nagging, you know, ego-shaped, literal two eyes. You just have the third eye of your emotional life that's dictating if you were in a moment of honesty or there was something raw and connected to your fellow actors at the time in theatre. Where in film you get to, and that's the thing I think is so many times in film I've remembered an experience as being, like I did this thing, Dead Man Down, 2 years ago, and I had an amazing experience working with Noomi Rapace. Such a wonderful experience working with her, and we had a really, just it was great. It worked, and I believed in the story, and the film was, anyway, it's just, you know, and you go, wow, how disappointing, because the experience, plus you're usually talking about 2 or 3 or 4 months of memories, both in and out of character. And to see it then distilled, what feels like demeaned nearly, by having, of course, what it always intended itself to be, which is an hour and a half, 2.5 hour version of itself, is a strange one when you're in it, I find. So I've never been able to have any objectivity that has not made me want to move on to have a better sense of objectivity. I mean, I'm not happy with the objectivity I have, like looking at the films kind of going, but I know a little bit more when a film works. I know a little bit more when a film works and when it doesn't, you know, and that's cool enough. I don't have to enjoy my own, I really enjoy doing what I do so much. I'm certainly not doing this anymore, I'm shit, you know, that's, thankfully, I don't do that anymore. You know, but I'm not saying I don't come out going, yeah, wow, I'm really happy with stuff, you know, but I get so much joy and contentment, you know, from the question more than the answer at times.
I did get you to admit you liked a couple scenes in Phone Booth, though. I
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, absolutely.
Because even then, I was only talking about Phone Booth.
Well, oh, you were. I mean, that one scene in Phone Booth, the confessional thing, was, I mean, and that's why it was the audience, the other actors on the street, the audience, the other working actors who I was sharing the scene with. How far do I want to push this? There was a big applause at the end of it because it was an 8-minute thing, and it was they didn't know the page, so they had no idea what was coming up, but I just know I was very connected. And that was a material that led me in a certain way to have this moment at the end of the film that was, I was as inside something during that scene as I've ever been, I think.
And also during this time, amazing directors were still continuing to seek you out. Obviously, Terrence Malick reached out to you for The New World. Now, Terrence Malick is so notoriously reclusive and press shy. So little is known about him. But what was your experience like with him?
Oh, it was amazing.
That's what I hear.
It was amazing. So boring because I just speak in platitudes, but I've had nothing but incredible experiences. Like watching Terry and Peter Weir, you know. Malick was gorgeous. He's so pure. I mean, he's, you know, state the obvious. He's really is. He is as fascinated by a blade of grass as he is by a human being, and he sees that one are somehow mysteriously connected, that neither is mutually exclusive in their journey through this world. And I don't think he finds one more interesting than the other. I think we're just used to seeing human beings take over a story. So if we see the story as 30% nature, we're like, he's obsessed with nature. It's like, no, not really. Not really. He just sees it as a really important element of the grand scheme. And like to the point where I remember, because he'd operate camera sometimes, and I remember him like operating the camera and going close on me, and then hearing a bird, and I was mid-line and going, "Oh, is that an osprey?" and off we go. And like so cool, you know, so pure, so endearing, you know. And if you know. He was incredible, and they built the fort that was Jamestown. They built that. Jack Fisk, who's worked at Terry Productions, designing all his films, an incredible artist. Jack and his team of craftsmen and women built that fort as the story was being told. So the whole world, as it was feeling itself, and as the narrative was taking place, was becoming physical as well at the same time, which was really cool. And they had a lot of the craftsmen in wardrobe who'd be putting it up all day, every day, doing the work they would have been doing in their own civilian clothes, and they just shot them in the background, because Terry likes to know that he can shoot in 360 degrees at all times. So you'd have whole crews running behind him, you know, like someone with a ladder turning around and people ducking, that kind of thing going on. But it was really, we shot quite a good bit in chronology as well, which is always a treat. I loved working with Terry. He would think of things on the spot. He would come in with, I hope he doesn't feel I'm betraying his trust or divulging secrets. It's all stuff that I have such fond memories of, you know, pages of dialogue in the morning, like 8 pages, and he'd tell you, you know, he just had a few ideas last night, would you mind? He'd be like, wow. And some of the stuff that he wrote, I mean, all of it should be published.
Yeah.
Should be, all of it. It's, I mean, you want the most gracious and sumptuous use of the English language, the most provocative terminologies that are coined purely by him. I mean, they're all there in his writing. It's gorgeous, and you would record them, and then in voiceover record a lot of them as well, and 5% of them would be in the film. Yeah. It would have been hours of voiceovers in Austin in a studio, and 5% of it would be in the film. And you just think, wow, he is that good that he can throw some of the most beautiful shit I've read in film away to the side. It's astonishing.
What about working with Woody Allen, who you worked with in Cassandra's Dream right after that?
Woody, I didn't get to, I think I met him 3 times. I loved working with him. They're all so different. Woody is not a hands-on director. He's a hands-on clarinet player, but as far as a director goes, he just, you know, he hires who he hires, and then he kind of, you know, every now and then he'd say something, but he very much seems to concern himself with the dynamics of the shot. And a lot of the stuff, you know, there was some Steadicam stuff, and he seemed to have a really clear understanding of what he wanted the physical blocking to be in a scene. You go over here, and then maybe you come here, and you do something, you know, but apart from that, he I remember once telling me a story about. I don't know him well, but once telling me a story about all week working on the film set, and he just wants to get to the weekend, and then the weekend comes and he can't wait to get back on the set on Monday, and it's a lose-lose situation. I just thought, wow. I thought that was so. When he told me, me and you, and we're listening to him, and he walked off me and you and just went. It was such a lovely moment, and if there is such a thing as a Woodyism, a lose-lose situation. But he knows exactly what he wants, and yeah.
I mean, you've worked with so many amazing directors over the years. What
I
is
really
it you
have.
hope for from a director when you show up to set?
Pants.
On them or you?
On them. Always pants. I mean, the same thing you hope, really, as you hope from your fellow actor and actresses. Just a love for it, really, you know, and it comes in all different ways and through different demeanors, but a love for what you're doing and a desire to, whether it's a desire to purely entertain or a desire to provoke or a desire to unearth some you know, really important truth about the way we are with each other as human beings. I don't know, but just a love for it. Preparation, you know, I mean, Peter Weir would have, and Oliver as well, reams of books. I mean, they would just dive into the world with such depth and such kind of vigor. It was inspiring to be around, and they would pass things off to you as well. Oh, have a look at that, and it'll be marked. And I mean, Peter Weir was astonishing for that when we did The Way Back. Yeah, so just that focus and love for it, really, and a sense of trust as an actor. I mean, I've worked. There's been a couple of films I've done where I trust the director as a person, as a guy. It's not like he's deceitful, but there's just a level of discomfort that I may have experienced that meant that what I did was more contained than it had the need to be. And if you can't really take chances as an actor, if you're not comfortable to overshoot the mark, you know, it's kind of hard to find some natural balance within the self where you feel like you're existing within the realms of the character's potential.
We actually had a question about working with Michael Mann, but do you remember?
I do. I mean, I do. Yeah, a bit.
And
yeah,
was
go
there
ahead. I'll see.
Gregor?
If it suits.
Right there.
Hey, man.
How did
He's rocking the Sonny Crockett and all.
That's true.
I did a Jump Street shirt though. The voice was too much.
Wants to know what it was like working with Michael Mann, and did he allow for much improvisation, or was it very strict?
No. It's Michael's very, very structured as a filmmaker. And it's great because he's incredibly pained in his pursuit of every last detail being accurate to what he feels is the time and the place and the energy of the characters. So there was no improv. It was all scripted, and you know, I mean that film. I wish myself and Jamie had a good buzz off camera. I wish we had taken a little bit of that off-camera stuff. Not to turn it should never have been Lethal Weapon, which I love. But if we had taken a little bit more of the way Jamie and I were off-camera having a laugh and imbued Tubbs and Crockett with that a little bit, I think, you know, I've talked to people that love the film, and I'm one of the people that thinks that it was just a slight bit too self-serious, just the tiniest. It was very, very dark, to the point where I go, see, I had met a lot of cops as well. I'd met a lot of undercover dudes down in Miami, and a lot of them really loved what they did. Well, they didn't lose sight of the consequences of one false step. They really loved it. They had fun doing it. They got a lot of kick out of it. And I just didn't. I wish we could have felt that more from the two boys in Miami Vice. But Michael's incredible. He's talk about dogmatic. He's about as driven, you know, a filmmaker as I've worked with, and will expect the same of everyone that works with him. You know, and he sets the bar very, very, very high. But again, another one of those great minds that, like, they're all very different, but Peter Weir, Oliver Stone, Malick, I mean, they are so well studied and well researched and prepared, and they have a completely distinct idea of what they want the aesthetic of the film to be. Particularly Michael. Michael is very, very concerned with aesthetic and with framing, and with Terry's a lot looser, of course.
You followed that with, in 2008, two movies that are great, Pride and Glory, which didn't quite find the audience I thought it deserved to find.
Thank you.
And In Bruges, with your, yeah. I love that movie.
Thank you.
I can't walk past a little person without thinking, midget.
Just
Damn
thinking,
you, yeah.
Thinking, yeah. Don't let your lips be involved in your
I
thought.
know, right. Obviously written by and directed by your fellow Irishman, Martin McDonagh.
Yeah.
Such an original, funny, crazy movie. Were you familiar with McDonagh's work
I
before?
was a little bit,
Yeah.
not much. I'd never seen one of his plays. I think I'd read The Pillow Man.
Oh, that's not a good one to start with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You meet Martin, and he's one of the sweetest fellas I know. He's one of the sweetest, sunniest fellas I know. The great irony, and he writes this cruel, dark, twisted material at times that also is not just cruel for cruelty's sake. It's not that self-serving. It's in Bruges, in many ways, was a love story between myself and Brendan's character. Do you know what I mean? It was very much the love story of these two lads that were both adrift at different stages of their life. When I read that, I mean, it was just, you know, you really know when you read something extraordinary. When you read something extraordinary, and what dictates that it's extraordinary really is, I suppose, the depth in which you connect to it, but also there was something that was academically extraordinary about this, that had such a level of intuition and such a cadence to the dialogue and such a absurdity to the situations, and yet all of it was grounded in what felt like truth and possibility. And so reading that script, I met Martin in New York. I was shooting Pride and Glory in New York, and I met Martin, and I said, "You should cast someone else." And he said, "What?" And I said, "I come with too much baggage." I said, "You know, this is too good." I said, the audience don't make this film an easy target. You know, they'll come in expecting something or thinking something with me in it. I said, "Cast someone else." And he went, "Okay, noted." And then he cast me, which I was glad about. But I really did. He'll tell you himself, I really did that first meeting. I said, "Cast someone else." And so I'm glad he didn't listen to me. And he's been not listening to me ever since for years now, 6 years. But I love Martin's stuff. I love him as a man, more importantly. But he's really delicious as a filmmaker as well.
Was that movie as much fun to make as it feels like it was?
In Bruges, it's tricky because not really. I mean, yes, like Brendan Gleeson lives very much in my heart and always will.
Mine too.
Yeah, yeah. Have you met him?
I have, and I was a simpering idiot.
It's very unlike you. It's said not disingenuously. I had a great time working with Brendan. We had some great laughs. We really did. And Jordan and even with Rafe and stuff. And but at the end of the day, it was one of those things about sustained pressure again. I was talking about with theatre versus film. And I was basically playing someone who was suicidal. And the story took place over 3 days. So it was 3 days stretched out over 8 weeks. So Ray was tricky. It was tricky.
It's funny.
Just in a good way, in a good way.
I forget how tortured Ray is.
He's
He also
tortured.
seems to be someone
He's
who loves
hilarious.
life.
Yeah, but he's hilarious and he's funny, but he's only a second or the wrong word said to him away from putting a bullet in his mouth.
Yeah.
Putting a gun in his mouth and a bullet in his brain.
You won the Golden Globe for Best Actor for that performance, besting the likes of Dustin Hoffman and Javier Bardem. What was that experience like?
In your face!
I beat Dustin.
No. I had to run with the word besting. You can only go with what you're given. It was cool. Yeah. It was cool. It was a lovely night. It was just a really lovely night. Look, awards, I mean, do they mean you're better or worse than? No, of course not. We know that. But are they better than a kick in the arse? Possibly. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, honest to God, and trust me, I mean, I'm sure, I know for myself, you wake up the next day, things aren't that different. You don't have any, oh, wow, now I've arrived. It's not, like, for me, none of that. So my point being, I thoroughly enjoyed it. As a bunch of people who thought I did okay, and that's cool. Thank you very much, genuinely.
Well, for a role that you told him you would bring too much baggage to, it must have felt like kind of a vindication.
Not really. I don't really live in a place of being, like, vindicating or, I genuinely don't. So I didn't feel, because I still respect my opinion at the time. I know it was coming from the place of a person who was incredibly uncertain, but I still respect it. And he was never one. Maybe I would have felt more vindication if he was going, "You're not right," and I was going, "I am," and he was going, "You're not," and I was going, "I am," and then he was like, "Okay, fuck it, do it," and I did it. And then I won an award. Maybe I'd go, "See, told you." But even then, I don't know. It was a film that I believe in, And I think it'll stand the test of time, particularly because of Martin's brilliance being all over it, and I can't say that about that many of them. So I have really fond memories of that. And we had a great night the night I won that. We milked it for all we could. That little silly thing with the globe on top of it. It was fun. And then I didn't get the placard for 2 years. I had that thing in my kitchen with a little piece of paper torn from a cornflake box that said "me." So I mean, you know, you don't really. It becomes that pretty quick.
What was the holdup on getting the placard?
I don't know.
It just showed
But I
up
felt
one day?
vindicated when it came 2 years later.
2 years later. Name was spelled correctly.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you think that movie helped or hurt tourism in Bruges?
Helped, I think.
I think it did too, actually.
I think the tourist board. I thought of Puttycat. I think the tourist board created a map that was, you know, dictated the sites that we shot various things on, and it had like a park bench and a gun and like a splat of blood on this laminated map. This triptych map I saw. So
That's amazing. I want to do the In Bruges tour. After that, you started to take on some really great supporting roles. I don't think you're the first person who would come to mind when casting a country music star.
oh yeah.
And yet that's exactly what you played in Crazy Heart,
was
and
fun.
you got to sing.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah.
How did that role come?
Vindicated again
Yes.
from my earlier days, my foray into
Boys'
Boyzone.
Own.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun because there's none of the pressure of none of the film. Not like I go off to work, the pressure of the film's on me, but there was none of having to. There's no what it does when I was just in for 4 days, and it was Jeff's film and Scott Cooper, and I was around music. There was a bunch of musos around and guitars everywhere on the set, and it was in. We shot in New Mexico, which is one of my favorite parts of the world, and it was a lot of the work was done for me because I'm spoken about. You know, a lot of other actors do the work for you sometimes. If you can just get out of the way and just be simple. And so it was all Tommy Sweet, fuck Tommy Sweet, Tommy Sweet this, Tommy Sweet that, Tommy Sweet. So just to go on and, as Duval says in that film, sing it like you mean it. And it was all, the stuff was fairly simple, and it was just myself and Jeff having a chat in the bar, and then a chat in the car park, and then that bit at the Toby Keith thing was interesting. It was a Toby Keith concert in New Mexico, and we got to interrupt. They were cool. They gave us 7 minutes between the opening act and Toby Keith and his boys coming out, and they gave us 7 minutes to run through the songs as many times as we could. So the audience were warned, and I thought, man, if some of this audience saw Alexander, I'm even dead,
So you're catching genuine audience response on
Yeah, and they were cool. They were all very cool. I wanted an old Blues Brothers style chicken net just in case to catch those bottles of beer that were coming up. But no, they were all really cool, and it was fun.
Was it Scott Cooper who thought of you for the part?
I don't know if Scott thought of me or I was suggested to him.
Yeah.
But it was one of the best experiences I can remember, particularly because I was around a lot of music and such a fan of Jeff's, and as I said, there was no pressure, just go in, and I got to mess around with stuff a little bit and create something.
Another smaller role that year was when they finally released The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, Terry Gilliam, obviously an amazing director, and it wouldn't have been finished without the cooperation of you and Johnny Depp and Jude Law. How long did you work on that film, and what was that experience like?
Oh, wow. That was, I think I did 2 weeks maybe on it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was a horrible circumstance to go to work, and I pray to God that I never got the call to, and when I did, I was like, what? Go and step in, what? I couldn't understand it. I was like, they're going to finish they want me to, I was just like, whoa, that's too, and then I finally had a less reactive understanding of what Terry wanted to do, and I met Heath's father and sister and spoke to them about it, and they were okay with it, and then once they were okay with it, then it was a no-brainer. But the experience was, in a way, brought people to, everyone came together in a really lovely way, the way people do sometimes when they lose someone that they adore. So there was that, but it was crap really at the end of the day.
Was it working with Terry Gilliam? Was
Terry's
that fun?
Terry's
Yeah.
fun. I mean, Terry's lovely. You know, Terry's lovely and brilliant and mad as a fucking brush. Like, really, love him though. He's mental. Yeah, he's cool though.
In 2011, you took on another role that I don't think people would think of you right off the bat in Horrible Bosses.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
were the most horrible of the horrible bosses. With the who had the idea for the comb over and the pot belly and the oh really?
Yeah.
Was that a freeing transformation?
Yeah, very.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd done like, broad comedy, so that's an actor who's a bit uncomfortable doing broad comedy. I was sort of, can I have a patch, maybe a peg leg? Yeah. But I didn't know when I read the script. When I read the script, I did have a very particular. I just had it seldom happens. I got a complete image of what this dude looked like, and the only thing that wasn't in the film that I had was he had a rat's tail as well.
Oh God. Comb over with a rat's
A
tail.
comb over and a little plaited, like a My Little Pony rat's tail coming down the back. But and the studio said no. And they said, no, what do you mean? You got a belly and a comb over? No, it's Colin. We'll do you to just do it like you, and then it's funny. It's written funny. You don't have to. And Seth was into it, the director, and he said, well, let's do a test. So we did a test, and they were like, oh, okay, it kind of works a little bit. But only if you lose the rat's tail. And I was like, fine, I'll lose the rat's tail. I'm going to lose the rat's tail.
Compromise.
Compromise, yeah.
So you really, the character wasn't written that way physically?
Physically, not at all. No, not at all. And like his just obsession with Korean culture, which probably doesn't come across in the film, with Korean culture. Not Korean culture, what he thinks is Korean culture, which basically would come down to karaoke machines and barbecue, you know. But I that was him, and he went down to Koreatown every night, and he dealt on the side in a little bit of electronic hardware and stuff, and had like dragons on his shirts and shit, and thought he was, you know.
And the directors went along with it? Like, I mean, they wanted to hire Colin Farrell. And
Seth was cool with it.
Yeah.
Seth was into it. You know, Seth is naturally, I think, subversive fella anyway. And you just have to look at King of Kong, you know. There's some good inspiration in King of Kong, I think, for Bobby Fella.
Would you go out in public like that? I mean, what was the response?
Would I? I would, but I didn't.
You didn't, okay.
I didn't, but I mean, he's a pretty particular looking dude. I mean, it was a much raunchier version of the stuff I did that wasn't in the film.
Really?
Yeah, I was kind of like, wow, they used all the tame stuff.
That's the tame stuff.
Well, it was yeah. It was the first, more than ever before, I felt like I couldn't really be touched in that character in a way.
Mm-hmm.
There was nobody gonna better me because he was such a dick that if anyone said to him he was a dick, he'd be like, yeah, right, whatever. You know, there was nobody. You couldn't penetrate him. He was so kind of unaware of what he was putting out that he couldn't feel anything that was coming in. And so in a way, that Bobby just put that thing. It was like mask work. It's amazing the liberation that we get as human beings when we feel that our face isn't being appraised by another person. You put a mask on and straight away it's kind of, wow, I can do shit. I can feel a certain way. There's a certain power or freedom. It was a little bit like that, you know. It was very, very liberating.
It's a shame you died. I hear they're making a sequel.
Bastard, I know. That's why I said, you know, start pushing in on Bobby Pellet's dead body and then you hear him pass wind. So just there, he'd like, "Mrrr." And then but no, alas, the days were numbered. One too many massages from a transgender Korean.
You reteamed with Martin McDonagh last year for one of my favorite movies from last year, Seven Psychopaths. And in this, you play a screenwriter with writer's block, while Sam Rockwell is your actor/dog napper best friend. Was there ever talk about taking the other role, or did he come to you with Marty?
No, he always had a very clear idea. He'd worked with Sam, and he always had a very clear idea that he wanted to mix it up. And I think Sam's role was more the Ray role, and
it is,
you know, and mine was a
similar,
little bit more the Brendan role, from even though different. No, and I kind of knew Sam was so brilliant in it, and I kind of knew I'd be fucking watching Sam do all this dialogue, going, "Oh, give me a shot at it," which happened from time to time because Marty was very much kind of even though there's moments where it's big, he's very much kind of the centrifugal source of sanity, if there is one. And often in the middle of films are the least interesting characters to play. I mean, you may have heard that before, but the center of a film has to be kind of the common denominator, you know, and then you get these interesting and eclectic characters of various behaviors and physicalities on the outskirts. But no, I loved working on it, and I loved working with Sam. Just adore that fella. And love working with Christopher and Woody, and yeah, it was a blast. And with Martin again, yeah, I loved it. I'd do anything, you know, than Martin.
Well, you're kind of in his repertory company now.
Yeah,
He
not a
seems
bad place to be.
Reuse the same people. That movie actually has one of my favorite side gags of all time.
Which one?
When Sam is explaining his big, you know, shootout scene, and he's like, "You're there too. You're taking notes." And
Yeah,
it cuts to
yeah,
like
yeah.
scrambling furiously.
That was fun. That was fun. That was fun. And then Martin said as well, you know, that we have an agreement that if there's ever a film that he does that I'm not in, it's fine, and if ever he offers me something that I don't want to do, it's fine as well. But I don't know how much. Yeah, it depends on what side of that it falls on.
That brings us to my favorite film of this year, which is Saving Mr. Banks. Such a beautiful movie. You play the alcoholic father of P.L. Travers, who wrote the Mary Poppins novels. And the screenwriter, Kelly Marcel, has gone on record as saying, like, you are the secret weapon in this movie, particularly your performance. How did the role come to you?
I got sent the script, and I know from my agent saying that it was all moving very fast, but that it was an offer, and I read it, and I just fell in love with it. I just think that Kelly wrote one of the most remarkably moving scripts that I've read in 15 years. And it was one that did not allow you to maintain any distance from it at all. It really, you were a subject of it as soon as the thing opened and goes through the clouds, and you see this girl, and she's there with her knees, and you can see it very clearly looking up, and you hear the voiceover of her father, and you're just dropped into the world straight away. So that was it, yeah. I mean, it felt like something different from anything I'd done, but that's not really the reason you ever do something, because there's loads of shit that's different from anything I've done, but you don't connect to it. I loved it, because it was honest about relationships between parents and their children, and people who are working in a creative environment, either resisting a common goal or striving towards a common goal. And it was as honest about human pain as it needed to be, without it being, you know, a Mike Leigh film or a Haneke film, you know, both of whose work I adore. And it's funny as well. There's a sweetness to it, I think,
Yeah.
that is really lovely and unique, and I haven't come across. So.
I'm trying to imagine the Michael Haneke version of Mary Poppins.
Wow, yeah. Probably just shoot the book. To be honest, you know what I mean? The
Mary Poppins is a
book
dark
is pretty.
book.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
I said something about it being very dark, and Kelly actually said, no, it's British.
Right.
She's saying it's very
Right.
British in how she treats the children. This film, it walks such a fine line in its tone. I mean, if done wrong, it could have been a disaster. How did you know that the director, John Lee Hancock?
I love John Lee.
Yeah.
I just, you know, man, he's too easy to write off, because he's one of the hardest things to do is to really tell a complicated story in a simple way, and John does that, and that's not easy. And he does it when he's shooting on set, and he does it when he's writing his scripts, and he does it, I think, maybe particularly in the edit. Because it's a complicated story, but it doesn't seem like it, and it really is if you break it down, but it doesn't feel like it at all. I think he's brilliant. He's just he like Kelly seemed to have a deep understanding of the material and of the tone that he wanted to strike, and the balance between the humour and the pathos and all the rest.
Was it W.C. Fields who said, never work with animals and children, and all your scenes are on a farm?
You must only work with children, because you can only work 8 hours.
Well, your co-star... the girl playing the young Emma Thompson,
Yes,
Annie Rose
Annie Rose
Buckley,
Buckley.
who you share all your scenes with, she's phenomenal.
Extraordinary.
Did that chemistry develop naturally, or?
No, they did. There was one day, there was almost like a chemistry day or something sick, creepy. But there was one day where I went over to the studio, and she was there with her tutor and her parents, and I maybe it was my suggestion actually. I'd take her for a burger. I mean, we went to In-N-Out Burger, and we got burgers, and then we went to a bookstore and picked her up some poetry, Shel Silverstein book, and And we hung out for a few hours, and that was it. But, I mean, she's a completely sentient being, and albeit a little one, and she was incredibly generous with me, you know. And she was just seemingly without ambition and not awed by film or by being around actors or being on a film set, which I'm not saying that she was, you know, a 10-year-old who was displaying disinterest and drying her nails, but she was just really present and really engaged when she needed to be engaged. But I think not being a stage kid or not having her parents were there and not having stage parents forcing her into this, you know, or she didn't have to adapt this sunny disposition. She was just very much her own person. And I came through on film, and she's beautiful to know what's happening in the story, and then to come back and to find her and find that beautiful, open, undaunted visage made PL's journey, Emma's work, all the more significant and profound. I had a dream working with Annie. She was delightful.
And Travers Goff, he was Irish, wasn't he?
No, I mean, it's hard to know. He was born, from what I understand, he was born in London and spent a little bit of time in Dublin. And then there's other people say he was actually born in Dublin, then moved straight over to London. But however, he was, whether he was English by birth or arrival, he spent most of his formative years in England, and then found himself in Australia when he was about 20 or 21.
Hey, you can call on some of your own personal experience for
Seriously,
that.
yeah.
I mean,
Think
this
his life
role
is
seems like it was written for you.
Oh, cool. Cool. No, seriously, I take that as a compliment. Yeah, I don't know, wasn't, but I made it that way. No, no, I felt for him. You know, I really did. I know you hear actors and you say, you know, you don't judge your character, you never judge your character. Well, true, but there are some characters that your empathy is ignited to a larger, more all-consuming flame than others. And this guy was, you know, I really felt a deep empathy for him, and I felt that his story is a common enough story of a father who's sick, you know, who's debilitated by melancholy, wanderlust, and alcoholism, and at the same time had moments of pure beauty and deep connection and joy with his children, but couldn't turn up at the end of the day, couldn't make it, and I think that's a tragically common story. So I felt with him, and maybe per capita, I don't want to say it, but possibly per capita more common in Ireland that I just before the Ireland I grew up in, maybe. So I was aware of that as well. Not that it was an act of generosity doing the part or altruism, or I wasn't, you know, reaching out to my lineage or anything, but I was kind of, there were certain scenes that before I was doing them, I was aware of what I was going into, and I was kind of, you know, there was a sadness to it.
Was it a difficult shoot, or?
No,
really?
That's one thing it wasn't. Because sometimes films, you know, like, that was the thing, with Alexander and Oliver, it was a Sisyphean task, you know, it was pushing the rock up and fall back down, pushing it up, and certain things, weather things, and certain things befell the production, and had to get up and do it. This one, some films you have to push them, will them into being, and some films grab you by the hand and take you with them. And this was one of those that seemed like it wanted to be told. Just there was no issues at all. It was so simple. A lot of that I think comes from John Lee Hancock, but some of it comes from the, you know, undiscernible desire of the material to find a life.
Can we talk about some of your upcoming projects?
Sure.
I know you have A Winter's Tale.
I was going to say I didn't have any, do I?
Yeah.
Winter's Tale, yeah.
Which is Akiva Goldsman's.
Looking for employment here today. yes.
We've talked about the adaptation of Miss Julie, which it was directed by
By
Liv
Liv Ullmann. Yeah, it was adapted and directed by beautiful, gorgeous, bright, extraordinary Liv, yeah.
And what's Winter's Tale? Look, the trailer is phenomenal.
Winter's Tale is a film that's based on the Mark Halperin book that I believe is very different from the book. I haven't read the book yet. I will read it someday, but I didn't read it because the book is so biblical in its depth, and that I knew there were going to be bits that I would want in the script. Why isn't that character? And I was like, no, I fell in love with the script, so I trusted that. But it's Akiva Goldsman adapted it from Mark Halperin's book, and it's his directorial debut. And What is it? I haven't seen.
It's
I
kind
haven't
of
seen it.
supernatural, isn't it?
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so. It's basically a love story set to the backdrop of the timeless battle between forces of light and forces of dark, I think, and quite sentimental. And I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's.
And Solace is also
Solace
supernatural?
is. Well, that depends on your definition of supernatural, if you believe in the world of metaphysics and stuff. But that is a genre thriller with Anthony Hopkins playing a clairvoyant. That's the supernatural thing. And I did a few days on that as well. I did like 2 weeks on that in Atlanta and got to work with Tony and Tony.
Yeah, you can call him Tony.
Sweet, yeah, Tony. All right, Tony. Got to work with him, and it was a blast working with him.
Yeah.
Blast working with him. Demented. I mean, you send him an email at 3 a.m, and bing, back it comes. Seriously, I'm like, wow, that's impressive.
Dying to know Anthony Hopkins' email address, because there's so many funny puns you could come up with.
You
for
could.
That, yeah. I want to take some audience questions. Colleen Braw wants to know, what's the one thing you know now about acting and the business that you wish you knew when you started?
Oh, that it's not life and death. That it's not, that nothing is, that, like really, you can't tell someone that, or you can't tell yourself that. You have to come upon it, and, I'm not saying I've achieved the Philosopher's Stone or anything. It's not anything deep I'm talking about, but it's really not life and death. It's cool, and it can even sometimes transcend cool and become important and connect to people and can answer questions and stuff, but at the end of the day, and also how privileged a position it is. So those two things are nearly at odds with each other, but they're not. Like, it's not everything, but it's a really privileged position to be able to make your living, provide for yourself and your family by telling stories. I mean, it's insane. So those things. Thanks.
Victor wants to know, right there. What would you have done differently if you weren't an actor? Or what would you be doing?
Wow, I have no idea, man. I mean, there's a world I'd be unemployed. I mean, seriously, because as I said, I didn't finish school, formative education, so I have no paper. But I've done lots of various bits and pieces of jobs. The only thing I ever really wanted to do was write a little bit. Was journalism. It was the only thing that had any academic inclination that I saw myself doing. So we'll go with that. An unsuccessful journalist. Just had to put the unsuccessful in just to make it.
It's not all it's cracked up to be. Is it even?
But you don't know what it's like to be an unsuccessful one.
It's open to debate. I've had my own Alexanders. Is it Eva Marie or Eva Marie? Eva Marie, sorry.
Hello, Eva Marie.
What's the most significant moment that told you you'd made it?
I remember sitting in Dominic's restaurant. Where is that? It's near the Beverly Centre. And I remember myself and my agent, and Josh Lieberman, sitting down and him leaning in. I remember Candle being at the table. I remember having a beer there and a cigarette and him leaning in and going, so I don't want to get your hopes up, but I think Joel Schumacher is going to offer you Tigerland. And I remember more now than I realized at the time. I didn't know it at the time, I didn't feel it at the time, but I remember there was shifts inside me. I remember there was something inside me that went, it's all going to change. It all what? Not for good, not for bad. It wasn't a joyful, as I said, I didn't even realize at the time, but I remember that moment so clearly, more than it's crystalline in my thoughts.
You've been with Josh for a long time. He's still your agent.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the time, I mean, he's a big CAA agent.
Mm-hmm.
Was he big at the time?
Yeah, he
when
was.
signed you?
He was, well, 5'10".
Yeah, I was
by
going to
then.
say.
He was. Yeah, I mean, he'd been very successful,
Yeah.
and was a part of a stable of agents who'd had a lot of creative success. Yeah.
So just getting him as representation was
No, that was
huge.
big. Yeah, I mean, everyone said. I've been asked what was the biggest step for you? What was the biggest? Everything has been. Like, honestly, the first audition, going into drama school, that was the biggest step at that. I mean, they're all, you could go, obviously, okay, the American film Tigerland, but each thing was a huge step. Even steps backwards show themselves in times to be awkward steps forward.
And finally, a question from, again, these names. You guys are killing me. Zachary Goodspeed?
Come on.
Yeah,
Are you serious?
name.
Zachary Good. Seriously, no, I believe you, man.
that is a great name.
God,
That's
that is
like
a
straight out of
great
the
name,
Crucible.
Zachary Goodspeed.
I love it.
That's so awesome.
And you have amazing handwriting, I have to say.
Can I see?
Isn't that nice?
Oh, it's beautiful. I can read it, which is more better than mine.
Exactly. What's the most important lesson the craft has taught you as both a human and an artist?
Oh, Zachary. You got me, man.
That's what we get for making fun of his name.
Seriously, it's instant karma. I don't know. Oh, I don't know. Because what do you learn through? I mean, that just it's very it's so simple. But unless you walk a mile in another person's shoes, I watch certain news outlets at times in America, and I'm not very politically minded. I find the politics of my own house that I live in, with kids and nannies and relatives, and I find those politics really hard, so I just try to keep up with those. But I apologize to anyone if they think I'm myopic or lazy. But I think unless you walk a mile in another person's shoes, it behooves you to avoid judgment at all. I read this thing this week, I don't mean to get topical, but about this guy on the airplane.
Yeah.
This woman on the airplane who was causing hassle, and she wanted to go back to her family for Thanksgiving, and she sounded like she was rude, and as he said, a complete bitch, and she sounded like she probably was. And if I was on the plane and she was making this fuss and we couldn't take off because she was going, I need to get home, and his point was that all the staff on the plane needed to get home as well. And he got into this correspondence with her where he wrote her a note and he said, eat a dick. Right? The woman he said was, yeah, I know, it's kind of funny, and then it kind of not, and kind of is, but kind of. And for me, I was kind of going, wow, not cool ever to write "eat a dick" on a piece of paper. I mean, it's hard to say without talk serious about "eat a dick" and its value to society. But now there's this whole thing online of people are like, yeah, he stuck it to her, yeah, for the common man, and fuck her, and yeah, and other people are like, no, a bit more like me, like, no, it's inappropriate. And I'm not the most reserved person in the world, but I don't think there's anywhere where you can justify saying eat a dick to a 40 or 50-year-old woman, or maybe anyone for that matter, unless eating dick was their thing. And you were presenting something that was worth, you get what I'm saying. And so I was thinking, what if this woman, he didn't go over and say to her, would you please keep it down? What's your problem? The rest of us are. He sent this note saying, eat a dick. And then it got this back and forth, and she got very upset. I'm like, how the fuck do you know that she didn't just lose somebody?
Yeah.
How do you know she didn't just bury somebody, man? How do you know she's not having a psychological episode? How do you know these things? Don't mean to get pious. I'm the furthest thing from pious. But I was like, wow, gotta take a breath. And when you, I think one of the things I've learned in the years is when you, as an actor, sometimes you get the opportunity as an actor incessantly to explore your own life and your own beliefs and how you relate to the world. And you have to be careful with that as well, because sometimes you can impose too much of your own sensibilities, unbeknownst to yourself, on material, or you can use the material as an outlet for certain things. And what that guy was doing on the plane, as far as I'm concerned, my humble opinion, was he was using that woman as an outlet for his frustrations. I get it, I'm a human being, and I used myself as an outlet for my frustrations for years. And that's what he was doing. But this whole thing about was he right, was he wrong, it's kind of irrelevant. No one knew anything about it. And maybe she was a thundering bitch, and maybe if I was on the plane, I wouldn't have this opinion that I have. But I wasn't on the plane, so I have the comfort of being able to have a little bit more of a measured reaction to it. Same way the people that don't fight wars, it's their obligation to talk about the problem with wars. Those who do fight them, unfortunately, they're sent by people who have no interest in losing anyone that they love. But they got to do their thing. They got to focus on what they got to do, whether you agree with the war or not. But those that are left behind, they have to pick up the argument. But I think if I've learned anything in the years as an actor and as a human being, and you don't separate the dancer from the dance at a certain stage. It's that you can't judge somebody until you walk a mile in their shoes, a lot of the time. Thank you. Is that us?
I can't top eat a dick, so I want to thank you so much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
It's a
thank you for
pleasure.
a beautiful career.
Pleasure talking to you. Love.